recognition and not recognizing the reality of the fact of what the West Bank is.
Yeah.
That it's these, as you said, this archipelago of disconnected, surrounded territories which are just completely besieged on a day-to-day basis. We
Right.
talk to our colleagues and friends in the West Bank, and that's the reality. It's impossible or near
Yeah.
impossible for Palestinians to freely travel between their
Yeah, there's 900
between.
checkpoints right now.
Yeah,
Why don't
exactly.
we look at the statement issued by the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the Foreign Minister Penny Wong? And this again is typical. So you can apply this to Canada, the UK, France, to all of them. But I think the Australian one really makes the point. So they say, effective today, the 21st of September, Australia formally recognizes the independent and sovereign state of Palestine. So let's see what that means, independent and sovereign. So in doing so, Australia recognizes the legitimate and long-held aspirations of the people of Palestine to a state of their own. Now, what's missing from that sentence? Doesn't use the word rights, aspirations. An aspiration is a wish. So there's no recognition of any Palestinian rights here. It's an aspiration. So no recognition of Palestinian rights, which a fundamental one being the right of return. So Australia's recognition of Palestine today, alongside Canada, the UK, etc., is part of a coordinated international effort to build new momentum for a two-state solution. So that's an admission. The first sentence says, we're recognizing an independent sovereign state. And by the time we get to the third sentence, we're told there is no such thing. It's just a PR effort to build momentum. So this is corporate jargon. And then they say that starting with the ceasefire in Gaza and the release of the hostages taken in the atrocities of October 7, 2023. So this is a restatement of Israel's lies and atrocity propaganda about October 7th. And of course, the so-called hostages who are still there, as John just told us, are prisoners of war, soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important point that, they call them hostages, but actually they are prisoners of war. These are all soldiers.
Yeah. So it's, they say ceasefire in Gaza. They don't use the word genocide, and we'll talk more about that later. Then they say this is part of Australia's long-standing commitment to a two-state solution, which has always been the only path to enduring peace. This is, of course, to try to rewrite history. It is not, and to limit, again, any political possibility to this so-called two-state solution. Why is it the only possible path? Why isn't abolishing this racist, genocidal, colonial entity a path to peace, just as racist, genocidal, apartheid South Africa was abolished and replaced with a democratic state? That would be a path to peace, but we're not allowed to talk about that because, as we'll see more in the statement, the commitment is to Zionism and Jewish and colonial supremacy, not to anything to do with Palestinian rights. Then they say here, the president of the Palestinian Authority. Wait, that's odd. Didn't you in the first sentence just recognize the independent and sovereign state of Palestine? And now we're still talking about the president of the Palestinian Authority. So what? So the first sentence, what did we recognize an independent sovereign state, but now we're talking about the president of the Palestinian Authority. So they've already withdrawn whatever recognition was there. Has restated its recognition of Israel's right to exist. Wow. The first mention of rights, and it's not Palestinians' rights. So this is not a statement recognizing Palestinian right to self-determination and statehood and existence. This is a declaration by the government of Australia of Israel's right to independence and sovereignty and existence, so-called, of course, Israel. There is no such thing in international law of a state having a right to exist. The only thing there is in international law is that people have self-determination. I've made this point before many times. East Germany has no right to exist. It's been abolished because Germany, the people decided to abolish East Germany and reestablish, I should say, I'm trying not to say a greater Reich, but I mean, that's what it is. Right?
That was their choice.
Yeah. So South Vietnam has no right to exist. Who's going to go and fight for South Vietnam's right to exist? There's no such thing. Doesn't exist. Peoples have a right to self-determination. Israel has no right to exist, nor does any other state. So again, the president of the Palestinian non-state has restated the right of Israel to exist, including commitments to hold democratic elections and enact significant reform to finance, governance, and education. And these are code words that go back decades into the Oslo process, which are classic colonial ruses. Because what are we talking about here? The colonial idea, the British colonial idea, as well as other, is that, oh yes, we're going to eventually give these colonies independence when they're ready. But they're not ready now. They're children.
Yeah.
We are the adults. So until they learn self-governance, which we have to rule them. And that's the modern version of that. So they have to have all these reform. And education here is the code word for changing the Palestinian curriculum and making it a Zionist pro-Israeli curriculum, which has been the agenda for decades and decades.
Yeah.
And
Then we go on. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
well, actually, I wanted to make a point about Mahmoud Abbas, but maybe you should finish the letter.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost at the end of it. I just
Yeah.
want to go through. So then they say the terrorist organization Hamas must have no role in Palestine. Wait, we just recognized the independent and sovereign state of Palestine.
With
And here's
elections.
the Prime
Yeah.
Minister of Australia telling the people of the supposedly independent and sovereign state of Palestine who isn't allowed to rule them, and defining the party that won the last relatively free election in part of Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza Strip, as a terrorist organization. So who gave the Prime Minister of Australia the right to do that and the chutzpah to do it in what purports to be a recognition of Palestinian sovereignty and independence?
Yeah.
And then they say, crucial work is underway across the international community, which means the countries that support Israel and are working with Israel to complete the genocide, to develop a credible peace plan that enables the reconstruction of Gaza. The reconstruction of Gaza, they're talking as if they're proceeding from the point at which the genocide has been completed. So there's nothing in here about stopping the genocide, stopping the murders, the massacres. There's been no mention of the mass murder at this point of what is almost certainly hundreds of thousands of people. That's not mentioned. It's not there. This is outrageous. This is vile. It's absolutely vile.
Yeah,
and then
and
they
it's
say
still
the
ongoing.
leadership of the countries of the Arab League and the United States, Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff, Mark Rubio, maybe Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg, is vital to this task. And the Arab tyrants who are doing business with Israel and who are shielding Israel and who are shooting down attempts to halt the genocide, allowing Israel to fly through their skies, to bomb our other Arab countries. Then they say Australia will continue to work with our international partners to help build on today's act of recognition. Now, Again, if you read the statement from Mark Carney, the Australian Prime Minister, from Keir Starmer, it's all the same garbage. And what I want to say to people is, don't fall for this for a second. This isn't a step forward. I've had people telling me, oh, but it's a step forward. No, it's not. This is an effort to define Palestinians to define Palestinian rights out of existence. Notice, again, I emphasize this, the only mention of rights in this statement was Israeli rights, so-called Israeli rights. No mention of self-determination, no mention of the right of return, no mention of the right of Palestinian victims of genocide to justice, to restitution. No mention of accountability for the genocide that Australia, Canada, Britain, France, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Germany, not take Germany out because they're not involved in this recognition. All the other countries that are still involved in this genocide, in mass murdering the people of this allegedly independent and sovereign state, that all of these countries who are complicit in this ongoing genocide have not recognized any Palestinian rights. None. What they want to do is take a concentration camp and put a sign on it that says State of Palestine. And if anyone falls for this, I don't know what more we can say at this point, more than 30 years after the so-called Oslo Accords. This is just an attempt to revive that in the middle of a Holocaust.
And these are the very same countries that allowed the West Bank to be turned into a bunch of Bantustans that can never be a state because they're surrounded by a wall, because the settlement enterprise quadrupled under their Oslo fantasies. They're the ones who allowed this to happen, that didn't speak up when the West Bank was being turned into something that could not be a state. So I just find that part really rich. The elections part is really rich too, because the reason why there's not been elections is because of Mahmoud Abbas. And it's because of the international community that blocked elections because, wait for it, because they were going to lose. Every time they're going to lose. And the first time when Hamas won the election, all of these countries, they thought Abbas was going to win the elections. That's how little they understood about Palestine. And Condoleezza Rice fell off of her treadmill when she saw that Hamas won the elections, because they thought that Abbas was going to win. And since that election, they have not allowed elections to happen again, because every time it's been clear that Hamas will win those elections again.
Yeah.
So
And every single time in history that one of these genocidal settler colonies were facing indigenous resistance, they defined it as terrorist. Yeah. Every single time. The British in Ireland, the French in Algeria, the Americans in Vietnam. I mean, it's the same story everywhere. And then they end up handing over to the so-called terrorists. The same in Afghanistan. Now, Donald Trump is saying he wants Bagram Air Base built by the Soviet Union back.
And they built it.
So every single time, the ANC, the African National Congress, all these countries considered it a terrorist organization. Who do they think they're fooling here?